Hello. Hope you can hear the wind and the rain hammering down on the roof of my studio. There's only a fairly thin layer of very dodgy old looking corrugated something. I don't even want to think what's in that. And some very, very old windows, some of which have holes in them, gaps between the windows and the ceiling, which is letting some water in, but I found a dry spot here. I'm hoping that the roof doesn't cave in or anything like that. I've fallen through the floor in here before because I'm on the first floor. Well, I say I've fallen through. I put my foot through the floor, right up to my leg, right up to my knee. I was lucky enough not to do any major damage. So this is quite a rickety old building, and it is condemned. So I've only got it for a while. But the wind out there today is really quite something. So I've got just about enough shelter from it to do some painting. I hope you can hear me. And you'll note, if you've seen any of my more recent videos, I've not done a lot of, I guess what you would call figurative art, traditional painting that uses a brush and depicts real things in the real world, and most of my art up until recently has been exactly that. It's been exactly that, and then I've been experimenting much more with abstraction and just general experimentation over the last month or so. And I intended for this canvas to be just another big experimentation. I had a slightly different idea, but it had this half finished piece already on it of this lady, and I was just going to scrub it out, but I thought let's leave her in and see if I can work with it. And I felt sort of compelled to integrate the old with the new, and so I've got these alien motifs that are appearing all over my work, and increasingly I'm introducing these symbols like runes that are turning up, and then there's a whole bunch of collage on here that's been really distressed. So I really heavily distressed the canvas, but you can see bits and pieces of it poking through, and I really love the effect you get when you sort of distress things. So I layer up, sand back, drench the canvas, see what bubbles up, rip it and hack at it, and all sorts. Anything that will give it some interesting texture but doesn't destroy the canvas. And now I'm starting to build things back up again in a combination of this sort of symbolism that I've got going on, symbolism in the very literal meaning of the word, and abstraction, collage, and then right in the centre of it, this big figurative portrait-like thing, and which is a real synthesis of my styles and my recent approaches. There's been many times in the last day or so as I've been producing this that I thought, no, this is terrible. Hence I haven't really shared it up until now. And I didn't know how this was going to come out. I started off with one idea, I pivoted to another, and I was like, I just didn't have anything in my brain about how this would look. So I had to just sort of roll with it, and I think it's coming out quite well. The composition is odd, and I like that. There's a lot going on in it. It's it's been quite messy. When I stand back, it looks very messy still, and I think it's I like mess, but this is too messy, and the two styles clash a bit too much, and so I'm really trying to sort of bring it together and tidy it just enough so I don't destroy some of this lovely texture and collage and hide the hot collage underneath. I really want to sort of accentuate what needs accentuating and then leave what needs leaving alone. And I've kind of been thinking a lot over the last day or two about, you know, what makes a difference between something that's finished and, you know, good and worthy of showing to other people, and you know, I talk a lot about, you know, it's done when it's done. It's done when adding anything more to it will make it worse, but that's not often enough, especially when you're in a position where, you know, it's not at all clear to you, especially if you're messing around with new styles, techniques, mediums, what good really should look like for you or for anyone else for that matter. And I sort of, it's especially salient with abstraction, because it doesn't resemble, you know, it doesn't represent anything necessarily. It might just represent an emotion or something, and so how do you know when that's conveying, you know, what you want it to convey, and whether the difference between it being just a big old mess of, you know, paint or whatever, versus something that's going to speak to people, whether it speaks to you. And often I'm looking at something and I'm going, well, it's abstract, all right, but you know, is it saying anything? Is it finished? You know, do I like it? And I'm often like, well, no, I don't. But then I'm like, well, why do I not like it? What's wrong with this? Is it just doomed as a picture, or is it that I just haven't quite got it to the right state yet? And it's an important question because, you know, I've sort of given up on many an artwork because I'm like, well, this is going nowhere. I only need to sort of dig it out later on and go, actually, no, this is all right. This is exactly what's happened to this one. And, you know, I'll start working with it again and figure out what to do with it. But it's a question you've got to ask yourself, because often I'll get one of these things out and, you know, demolish it when actually perhaps the thing that was there originally was good enough in its own right. And not even just good enough, just very good. And there's a struggle I have with abstraction, you know. If you paint a portrait of a person, you know, your judgment will fall on whether or not it resembles that person or represents them. Whereas it's a lot harder, I think, with abstraction, which is why abstraction looks easy to the observer. You just splattered some paint on the canvas, but there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Anyway, what is it? What conclusion did I come to with regards to doneness, worthiness, as when you're dealing with sort of abstraction or more exotic or creative approaches? And I think one of the key things for me here is, I guess, I've been struggling to find the right word, but I guess something like intentionality, right? In that, if you take some paints and just slop them on a canvas, unless you're really lucky or you're really talented, it's going to look just like someone slopped some paint on the canvas. And then you do, and so that first one might be good, but the next one you do isn't. And the next one you do after that, you might not know the difference. You might think, well, look, this abstract painter over here, you know, looks like they just slopped some paint on the canvas. So I did one that sort of looks like that, but the next one I've done looks like I've just slopped some paint on the canvas. Well, the first one you probably got lucky with, and beginner's luck's a big thing, I think, in art. But really it's the intentionality, is that you can really feel in a painting or artwork whether the person had really achieved something and noted and felt they've delivered something of worth, and that was intentional, that they would put forward and say, I created this, it means something, it has value, and that comes through by this sense of intention, which might appear in a single work, or it might need multiple works to develop, right? Why we get this sense of collections and movements in certain artists' work. It's you have to develop a style, and that style has to show intention. It doesn't mean you can't be spontaneous, or free and expressive of the moment, because a lot of this, and this is very much how I work, is that I'll know good when I see it. I don't see things in advance. I don't really have a mind's eye, so I don't really see what things are going to look like in my head. So I can't have intentionality in the sense that yes, this came out how I intentionally expected it to. It just means that it's the recognition of something that is well worked, well finished, well conceived, well judged, I guess, in my sense. There's a big difference between a picture that is still a work in progress versus something that is very much done, right? And it's that sense that you've considered it, and you've stood back and gone, well, this represents something about me, or something about the world, or something about the medium or the art form that has some meaning in the world, right? And that has some intention from yourself. And I don't think you can just pick up a paintbrush or get a canvas or a piece of clay and just suddenly start making things and be able to show that intentionality. In many ways, that's the trick. It's not learning how to paint with oil paints. It's about learning how to recognize something that has value and resonance and purpose, and that's what art is. I think people mistake the medium for the art itself, like the art is in the medium. No, the art is conveyed by the medium, and that's really, really important if you're going through the process of creating, and you have to really refine that eye. And some people are more naturally good at this. Some people think they're more naturally good at it, but aren't, but have rich parents or something, or are just bloody lucky. And some people produce amazing art without understanding this at all. They just sort of seem to intuit it. And some people work very, very hard to develop it and have very, very many stumbles along the way, and that all goes into their style and their approach and their subjects, and makes it all the richer. I don't believe that an artist should suffer for their art, and I've done a podcast episode about this, but I do believe that art and artworks need to show a level of commitment, effort, intentionality, and passion and caring, and you can only show that by doing it, by being the thing that you want people to see from your pictures, your artworks, your films, your photographs. So yeah, this piece was very much lacking intentionality. It was very messy. I was sort of going to make it a bit more abstract than it actually is, but this is me. This is what comes out. This human form here will not be satisfactory to me unless it looks like a human and has the feel of a stylistic feel that I'm comfortable with. So really what I'm doing at the moment looks a bit random, and this is how I work. I'm not stepping, I'd usually step back and forth a lot, but I'm going to step out of camera, which will be a bit weird, but I'm just sort of, I tend to work with one colour at a time, and I'll go through and I'll start adding that colours to places. Maybe it's dark or maybe it's light, and I've used a lot of white in here, and I've used a lot of dark greys and blacks, and the clash between the two was a bit extreme. So I'm sort of extinguishing some of the darker blacks and greys with this deep violet, which I've got a couple of dark colours that I use regularly as a black substitute, and I've got no problem with using black, but you know, it's the right place, the right time. So I've got this deep violet that I use a lot, and I use Prussian blue a hell of a lot. And I'm sort of accentuating lines, I'm accentuating the divisions. I've got almost like I don't want to say cubism because it's definitely not that, but there's a sense where I've got these alien motifs that have broken up the line work and are creating a sense of dissonance, which is exactly what I want to portray here, and a sense of uncomfortableness. But also there's a geometry to it, and the lines intersect, and the colours intersect, and the fields of texture and colour intersect with each other, and they do so in a way that brings everything together, and to sort of creates almost a path through the picture. And there's no natural composition in here. I think the portrait element of it is, broadly speaking, composed how you might compose a portrait, but I've deliberately violated that by putting some sort of much less, but by creating a different composition, a different sense of perspective on this sort of overlay with these motifs. So there's two elements of composition in here. There's two pictures within this picture, perhaps three, if you consider the abstraction beneath it, and even more because there's lots of little images in it. What I've got to do now is, it felt like I'd painted over the top of one picture with the other, and now I'm going through it and trying to harmonise things. And I do think, you know, about this, like, you know, in terms of musical harmony, in that you can have things like rhythms and polyrhythms, or different sort of keys or different modes working together within a song or within a piece of music, that when you put them together one way don't fit at all, but when you put them together another way, or you use certain techniques to blend them, and polyrhythms are a really good example of this, where you've got one underlying time signature with different but complementary time signatures skipping over it, so that the sort of beats of the song fall in weird places. The sort of punctuation of the song is in a weird place, but there's a rhythm that goes through it. And this is used a bit in poetry as well, and it's used a lot in classical music in terms of melody, in things like canons, where you've got different aspects, things going backwards and forwards, working together, and the artistry isn't necessarily in the individual melodies, the individual rhythms, the individual structures, but the actual the way that the composer or the artist has brought those together to create something new and beautiful. And is this new and beautiful? Well, it's definitely new to me. Is it beautiful? I'm not sure I care. Is it compelling? I think that's for the world to answer if I ever show it. Is it fun to do? Yes. And I think when I talk about balance, which I do quite a lot, it's one of the other aspects about how I know whether something is, you know, coming together or finished is, does it feel balanced? And this one feels balanced in a very, very different way to how I usually do, and I don't think it's quite there yet, but balance in terms of tone and colour, balance in terms of line and texture, and balance in terms of these sort of opposing compositions, and I think there is a balance. There's certainly a balance emerging, but it's a very unusual balance. This is showing a very odd, you know, polyrhythm. You know, that's more akin to, I don't want to say progressive rock or something, but you know, something like that rather than pop music, right? There's a sort of commercial edge to this, a popular edge to this, but there's also some more complex things going on. Now, it might all be crap, so don't take this as me blowing my own trumpet. Just because you manage to strap a couple of melodies together so they don't sound completely discordant, doesn't mean to say that you've made a beautiful piece of music. That's something completely different. All I'm saying is that I've created something here, and I'm using some approaches and techniques that are not particularly usual to me, and creating something that is new to me, but and is being very enjoyable to create, but may just be a stepping stone to something else. And it's just as feasible. I'll stick this aside for a bit, bring it out again. No, mate, this is rubbish. And then paint over it with something else, or try and integrate it, or try and build on it. And so I don't really mind, but at the moment I quite like it. I'm going to step back in a minute and probably go, oh my god, what have I done? What have I done? I've murdered it. I've killed a perfectly good painting. So we'll see. If it's crap, you won't hear from me again. If it's good, I'll show it to you. Okay?